Well, it's time now for our look at today's international press with our press reviewer, Elena Casas, who joins me now. Hello, Elena. So, an historic victory for Aung San Suu Kyi, as we were saying in the news bulletin in Burma. How's that gone down in the international press?
Well, the papers are full of front pages showing celebrating Burmese Aung San Suu Kyi supporters, like these ones here on the front page of The Guardian, holding up her portrait. The thing is, though, it hasn't quelled widespread fears that she's fallen into the junta's trap by agreeing to stand in this election, the fear being, of course, that they'll be able to legitimise themselves internationally now that she's agreed to participate, but her party won't gain anything from it. Now, in the Independent's editorial, though, they say Aung San Suu Kyi is right to ignore the risks. They say she's obviously taken into account the worry that her party can, at the very most in this election, only win 10% of the seats in Burma's parliament, so the amount of influence they can have is bound to be limited. But just remember, they say, until very recently, no one thought this could ever happen. The conventional wisdom was that the Burmese junta was so homogenous and so strong, so well established, that the chance of this kind of amount of democracy, even if it's tiny, was zero. So if Aung San Suu Kyi reckons that the risk of running in this election, going into that parliament and possibly legitimising the junta is worth taking, then the international community must support her. Over in Foreign Policy magazine, they take effectively the opposite point of view, though. They say her party can have virtually no effect on policy in Burma with just 10% of seats, even if they do as well as possible. And the generals are probably just putting them in there as a sop to the international community, calling on them for more democracy as a way to avoid sanctions. They also point out the NLD's policy is based far too much, they say, on the figure of Aung San Suu Kyi herself. There aren't really any second-tier figures in the party that could replace her as she gets older, and it's their whole election campaign is very much based around her charisma. She's seen almost as a demigod, they say, in Burma, but you can't run a whole political transition around one person.
Okay, well, we're going to move on now to Syria because also interesting events happening on that yesterday, on Sunday. A major international summit in Istanbul held, the Friends of Syria getting together. Does the press have much faith that the talks there can make a difference?
Well, in a word, no. As the Independent reports, it seems that the leaders there themselves seem to have decided that a diplomatic solution has no real future, even though, of course, there was a lot of talk about the Kofi Annan possible solution. Now, the Independent says, as you've been saying in bulletins, that Gulf countries have now agreed to pay the salaries of the Free Syrian Army's soldiers and probably supply them with weapons as well. And Turkey is also notably taking a stronger stance, talking about the idea of implementing a buffer zone on its border near Syria. But does Turkey actually want to do that? There's quite an interesting analysis in the Egyptian paper Al Aram, which takes a wide number of quotes from different Turkish newspapers, pointing out there's a lot of fear in Turkey that the country could get itself wrapped up in a regional war that would be inconvenient for it and could indeed exacerbate successionist tensions within Turkey itself. The Turkish newspapers seem to think that it's the West who really wants them to go out in front, if you like, as NATO outliers and take a strong line against Syria, get involved in arming the opposition and things like that, so that the US doesn't have to, but that Turkey is being pushed, if you like, by the rest of the West into this more aggressive role towards Syria they don't necessarily want.
Okay, well, you've also been moving on again at politics in China, because there's rather a murky race for the leadership hotting up there.
Yes, whole mix of stuff today. This is also from Foreign Policy magazine. Now, you might remember about couple of weeks ago, the Chongqing Premier, Bo Xilai, was forced out. We're not quite sure why. It's a little murky. There's all kinds of rumours surfacing on Chinese microblog sites about things like, was his wife linked to the murder of a British businessman in the city, things like that. Now, Foreign Policy's correspondent there explains that it's all part of a kind of power struggle that's been going on for decades between different currents within the Communist Party. Of course, there's a leadership race coming up in October, a leadership vote, rather, within the Communist Party, and they say Bo Xilai represented, if you like, a kind of more statist alternative. He brought back some nostalgia for the Cultural Revolution. He brought back Mao slogans on posters in Chongqing and broadcast old advertisements from the 1960s. And the opposition, if you like, to that is represented by the current Prime Minister, Wen Jiabao, whose approach is much more about free markets rather than a statist approach. And it looks like it's him that's won by discreetly bumping off his rival politically.
Okay, well, thanks very much indeed, Elena, for that look at today's international newspapers.